And last topic here, there are a lot of individual differences in how we see things. So this is an example of normal vision. So where if you're seeing, for instance, this image of a candle, it should pass through the pupil, get reflected by the lens, and hit directly at the retina. So the goal of normal vision, or what occurs in normal vision, is for the image to perfectly land right in back of the eye. However, maybe some of you like me wear glasses for either nearsightedness or farsightedness. So nearsightedness means that you can see near. So in this case, the candle is getting bent by the lens to occur in front of the retina. So it's a little bit longer of an eyeball. So you'll notice here, like the eyeball physically looks a little too long compared to the normal or the other. And that's because the image is projected too far in front. Whereas the other condition, farsightedness, meaning that you can see things in the distance, you can see far, occurs because the image of the candle is reflected farther back in hypothetical realm behind your retina. So this means your eyeball is a little bit too short, and so the image isn't perfectly landing at the back of your retina either. You also could have what's called astigmatism. So in astigmatism, that means that the surface of the cornea, so again, this kind of protective part in the front, isn't even, it's a little bit uneven, which means that as you see here, your image is a little bit blurry because the thing that you're perceiving is kind of not one solid image. It's producing multiple adjacent images in the back of your retina. But there are also cultural differences too, and I want to kind of break down what I'm talking about here. So there are what we call individualistic cultures, cultures that are concerned with themselves, the I identity, your own goals, that type of society. Things like the US is an individualistic culture. And then we have collectivistic cultures. So this is more of the we, the group, doing what's best for the group as opposed to yourself. So we're going to break down, there are actually differences in how different cultures perceive and are able to see things. So for instance, this is another famous illusion, again asking whether which vertical line is longer, the left or the right. Now, if you're like me, you might see this left line as being perceived as longer. But fun fact, not everywhere in the world falls victim to this illusion. Some researchers kind of think that this might be due to the Western experience of being in a world of a lot of right angles. A lot of our streets are very perpendicular to each other. And so we're used to perceiving vertical lines. And so this might be why things, we're able to fall victim to illusions that use vertical or horizontal lines. Whereas this illusion is less common in African and Filipino participants. So if you would kind of look at perhaps what their geography might be, it's a little less perpendicular in some spots. So it might be more curvy. They might be used to different types of streets and whatnot than Western cultures are. And then one other example here before I'll end is actually how we look at images. What draws our eye is different between the cultures too. So if you look at these two images, what do you look at? So these images have pretty clean figure ground distinction, plane against the mountains, tiger against the forest. This kind of gestalt principle of figure ground was thought to be a pretty ingrained human built-in mechanism. But that idea has been challenged because different cultures prioritized figure and ground differently. So one study recorded the eye movements using an eye tracker of Chinese and American college students as they were viewing these types of photographs. And they learned, whereas American cultures, American students, which you see here in yellow, spent most of their time staring at the actual figure, the foreground of the image, the plane or the tiger. Chinese students focused on more of the entire image. So they determined this through memory tests afterwards. American students, I believe, had better memory for the foreground, whereas Chinese students were able to better remember more of what was going on in the background. So this might be cultural differences, the importance of context, or what's important to these different types of cultures. Researchers aren't super sure, but we know that there are differences in how we take in visual information. So just to wrap up, hopefully now when you see visual illusions like these, you can use some of this knowledge about how our minds perceive things, how our minds get tricked. So for instance, this table through linear perspective seems to be receding off into the distance, so it looks like it's farther away, but it's really not. Use these kind of clues that we've talked about today to understand how our eyes get tricked and perceive things differently than they actually are. So with that, I'll wrap up. As normal, post questions you have on the discussion board. I'll link some additional videos for fun on Carmen, and come ready on the next Wednesday to talk more about this. Hope you enjoyed. Bye guys.